Almost everyone views death as the worst possible thing that could happen to them. After all, we are subconsciously hardwired to avoid it. In fact, most of all that we do is done so we can keep on surviving. We eat so we can satisfy the needs of our body. We work so we can get money to buy the essentials for us to live. We have kids so we can continue this cycle of living. And we fear literally any situation in which our life is in danger. But why do we think that way? Why are we scared of death? Have you ever actually stopped to think why? Why do we fear death? What I am going to say here may be a shock to many. You may have a negative emotional reaction to the words I am about to say, but promise me you'll hear me out. You fear death because you are selfish. That's right, you fear death because you are selfish. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We're all selfish to some degree, but let me explain this more. So when I talk about fearing death, I'm not talking about the simple act of the body ceasing to live. I am talking about fearing what comes along with that. And what comes along with death is the complete destruction of the self. That's what you're really afraid of. You are afraid to not be you anymore. That's why being afraid of death is selfish. Death is the complete letting go of all that you believe to be you. In your entire life, you've been defining you. And you become attached to the self you've created, and the idea of losing it can be terrifying. Identity is the key to understanding what entails death, and the key to understanding life. Without your identity, you are literally nothing. To even realize that you are living, you must have adopted some form of identity. Let me explain this more. So your identity has layers to it. The core base of you is your identification of being human. You also identify with your name and your family, maybe your ethnicity or your nationality. And these core concepts become so ingrained into your identity that you don't even think about them. They are the roots of what we consider to be ourselves, and as we develop, we add to this identity. Let's take a scenario of a young boy named Jimmy. From a young age, he realizes he is tall, and someone tells him he should get into basketball because tall people are good at basketball. So Jimmy starts playing basketball, he enjoys it, he's pretty good, and eventually basketball becomes a huge part of his life. So now he identifies with being good at basketball, and his whole life is just consumed by basketball. If Jimmy's not playing, he's watching it. And he knows all the players and all the teams, and he knows all their stats. But then high school rolls around, he tries out for the team, he's super hyped to finally play high school level basketball, but then Jimmy gets cut from the team, and his whole world is turned upside down. And because Jimmy so heavily attached himself to basketball, it became such a key part of his identity, all the work he put in wasn't enough to make the team, he's just absolutely crushed. And it's almost like a part of him died. Well, what really died in this scenario is just one aspect of Jimmy's identity. And like what we do when someone we love actually physically dies, Jimmy goes through a mourning process when this part of him dies. But luckily, Jimmy has a lot else going for him. He has a lot of friends. He's got a supportive family. This isn't the entirety of Jimmy's identity. He'll get over it. He'll move on. He doesn't feel like he's actually dying. But actual death, what we consider to be death, is essentially just the letting go of everything we identify with. And I'm not just talking about how you identify with whatever high-paying job you have, with being a such and such university graduate, being number 5 in the world on Doodle Jump, being best friends with Phil, and being the husband of Jill and the father of Jimmy. You could stop being all of those things and still be what is considered alive. I'm talking about the core identity of being human here and realizing everything that comes with being human. To even realize that you are living, you must be attached to the concepts that there even is a life and a death. You must identify with the idea that there is a before and an after. But the truth is, the whole idea of a before and an after is just an idea. It's completely abstract. It's a human-created concept. We all have this idea that we're here in the now, and there is a before, the time before we were born, and there will be a time after, which is the time after we die. These are all concepts that come with being human. Adopting these concepts has become a part of your identity, and you don't even realize it. This is your sense of self, and without it, it's like you're never born. Think of a fish. Do you think the fish realizes that he's a fish? Of course he doesn't, because a fish is a human word. A fish is a human concept. Humans project the idea of a fish being a fish onto the fish. The fish would have to be human in order to understand that he is a fish. From the point of view of the fish, all he is doing is existing. He might try to get some food, maybe find a partner and swim along with the school of fish that he's in. But the fish has absolutely no concept of a before and an after, or a life and a death. These are all human-created things. From the point of view of the fish, he just simply is. He's just an awareness carrying out what his biology has programmed him to do. So from the point of view of the fish, he cannot comprehend that he will ever die, because he cannot comprehend that he is even living. So if the fish never considers himself to be living, does he ever die? If you let go of the concept that you're alive, would you ever die? What I am saying here is that death isn't what you would consider to be a physical event. In fact, the whole concept of death is all in the mind. And I am actually proposing that everything you identify with and experience is a construct of the mind. The very idea that there is a physical and a non-physical, and that there's a mind or not a mind, is also a core identity that you have created for yourself, and you don't even realize it. Or it's kind of the identity that humanity has created for yourself, and you've just been brought up to accept that. And there's nothing wrong with that. So what if you literally let go of all of that? Literally everything you know. What if you just let that go? Would you even be alive? Would you ever die? To understand this insight I've proposed, you can't even be acting from the paradigm of materialism and science, because those two are part of the identity of humanity. And it is actually possible to experience a complete deconstruction of all subjective self-identity without physically dying. This can be done through psychedelics, and when one experiences a complete loss of identity, we call it an ego death. It is incredibly difficult to describe, but what I can best describe it as is a gradual dissolving into the environment around you. And once your identity is gone, you're just pure formless consciousness. It's dissolving into the very thing that you manifested out of. In this state, it is like you're nothing and everything at once. People who have experienced it know what it's like, but for people who haven't, it's pretty impossible to comprehend. You don't know your name anymore. In fact, you don't even know that you're human anymore. Literally all identity is gone. At this point, you may not even feel attached to your own body anymore. For all you know, you could be that fish, just simply existing. And because you realize that you are aware, after literally all identity is gone, you realize that death is just an illusion. Death is a mere concept that our identity has created for itself in order to protect itself. Some people say experiencing this completely eliminates all fear of death, but I think the majority of people who say that are just caught up in the moment. Experiencing this doesn't mean you will no longer be scared to die. The process of losing your identity in this experience can be excruciatingly painful, and one ego death can be enough to make somebody never want to take psychedelics again. So when I say you are selfish because you fear death, I'm saying that because you are afraid to let go of the current form you are in, which is what you consider to be yourself. And when you become too attached to this identity, you suffer the cost of looking at the world in a selfish way, which makes you see it only for how it can serve you, not for what it actually is. This is why all great spiritual gurus like Alan Watts, Eckhart Tolle, the Buddha, and many, many more have told you that attachment is what leads to suffering. If you were never attached to anything, you would completely cease to suffer, and in a sense, you would also cease to exist. If you're on the spiritual path, you know that the greatest hindrance in your journey will be attachment. So what's my point in making this video? My point is that I want you to be honest with yourself about your death. I wanted to put some perspective into what you're really afraid of when you think of death. It is important to accept that there will come a day when the current form you are in will no longer be your form. People become so occupied with merely surviving that they forget to live. In the moment of death, the biggest regret people have is not truly living. A child sees everything as amazing because he isn't viewing it in terms of survival and profit. When we truly let go and become aware of our death, we become inspired to do things that are more interesting, exciting, and fulfilling. Life doesn't have to be the thing where you're merely just scraping by. You don't have to be miserable your whole life in a 9-to-5 just to feel like you're surviving or fitting in. Do what your soul has always wanted to do. Learn to let go and live while you're alive. Remember, death is the end of your identification. That's what you're really afraid of. The key to life is to die before you actually die, so when you actually die, nothing dies at all. To do this, you must learn to let go. And I don't mean it like you should start letting your whole life go and stop caring about yourself. I don't mean it like that. Just start letting the little things go. Then you can work your way up to letting bigger things go that require letting go. Psychedelics can be used as tools to let things go, so do your research on them if you're interested. I got plenty of videos on that topic, including a complete guide on how to use them for personal development. So yeah, this was my insight on death. This current viewpoint of death that I have is definitely subject to change, just like every insight I have is, but I thought it was worth sharing. Let me know what you guys think of it in the comments. Feel free to subscribe, leave a like, helps promote the content so more people can see it, and also feel free to check out my other videos. And as always guys, have a great day and peace.